Esteemed Lieutenant General Magal, Director Center of Land and Warfare Studies, esteemed members of the Presidium, dear friends and colleagues, good morning, and I would like to apologize for keeping you waiting. The traffic jams is something unpredictable in Delhi, but hopefully this was the only obstacle in our today's deliberations. It's a matter of honor and pleasure for me to be here this morning to participate in the seminar. This very thing, the very theme of today's discussion, if you look beyond the message that it carries, tells a lot about the level of mutual respect, mutual trust and mutual understanding that for many decades serves as the strong foundation of Russian-Indian ties. To my mind, only good, close and sincere friends can meet together in such prestigious institution to discuss in an open and frank atmosphere the whole range and various specifics of international problems and our bilateral relationship. So let me start by expressing on behalf of the Embassy of the Russian Federation in India sincere gratitude to the organizers of this interaction. Rather significantly, this meeting takes place in the middle of the year that is marked with very important events in the history of Russian-Indian relations and the world at large. On March 9th, all people of Russia, as well as of CIS countries, celebrated the 17th anniversary of victory over fascism in the Great Patriotic War. In fact, for everyone who cherishes peace on earth, this is a day of pride and sorrow, a day of unfading glory and joyous jubilation. Many generations of sons and daughters of my country and the people of East while USSR see it as most sacred and important event which brings together and unites representatives of various nations, irrespective of their profession, religion or citizenship. The Great Victory Day once again gives us an opportunity to pay tribute to the heroic deed of Soviet people who sacrificed their lives and liberated their motherland, who saved the world from the Nazi flag, from bloodshed, untold sufferings and tyranny. We should always remember that 27 millions of lives of my compatriots were lost on the battlefields and on the territories occupied by the Nazis. It's very indicative that despite the sanctions imposed on Russia and all other attempts of Western powers to isolate my country, leaders of almost 30 countries, including the Chancellor of Germany, Ms. Angela Merkel, visited Moscow to commemorate the date. Russia highly values and welcomes the solidarity expressed by India on occasion of the 17th anniversary of Victory Day. President Pranab Mukherjee participated in the celebrations in Moscow, and a special contingent of Indian Army proudly marched on the Red Square during the Jubilee Parade. We consider it as a telling gesture of our long-time and tested friend was my country. Needless to say, Russian people also cherish India's active role in the last World War and the sympathy of the most illustrious founding fathers, all common sons and daughters of this great land, shown for the heroic efforts and sacrifices of the former Soviet Union. We must never forget the lessons of that war. Therefore, it is unacceptable when some irresponsible politicians in the West encourage neo-Nazism, which stirs up the inter-ethnic strife and escalates military threats today. As regards the cynical, hypocritic and dirty attempts on the part of some forces to rewrite the real history of the world, including the Second World War, the contribution of nations to the great victory, such countries show immoral and shameless amnesia to sacrifices and sufferings. Such forgetfulness today results in destruction, in devastation in various parts of the world, be it Syria, Iraq, Yemen, or even southeast Ukraine, or anywhere else. This year is also associated with another important date, the 70th anniversary of the founding of the United Nations, which was one outcome of the World War II. Both Russia and India stood at the cradle of UN. Both we are sharing the core values and principles of the UN centrally and multipolarity in the dealing with global and regional challenges for peace, security and development. Today there is no alternative to the development of consensus regarding the rules of sustainable global governance in the new historic circumstances, with full respect to cultural and civilizational diversity of the world and the multiplicity of the models of development. Together with India, we stand for sovereign equality of states, non-interference in domestic affairs, mutual respect, and taking into account the interests of concerns of each other, as in the case of, for example, in the framework of the United Nations Security Council, BRICS, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, G20, and other forums. We proceed from a common understanding that in order to reflect new realities, the UN needs a comprehensive reform, especially with a view to make the Security Council more representative and effective, so that it can adequately respond to the changing security environment, to the new challenges. Russia strongly supports India as a responsible global power to take permanent membership in the reformed United Nations Security Council. On the UN platform, as well as at various other international forums, Russia and India decisively condemn terrorism in all its forms and manifestations and stand for collective efforts in fighting global challenges and threats. At the same time, our message to the world is that there is an urgent need to refrain from double standards in settlement of regional conflicts, as well as from attempts to dismiss undesirable regimes under the pretext of fighting terrorism or defending human rights. Unilateral actions and use of force without the UN Security Council mandate, which led to dismal outcomes of operations in Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, as well as worsening situation in Syria, are absolutely unacceptable. Considering such dangerous tendencies in the global environment and their regional implications, Russia stands for soonest adoption of the India-sponsored Comprehensive Convention on International Terrorism. We also hope that India will join the Russian proposal to launch under the auspices of the UN Security Council an in-depth study on the extremist and terrorist threats coming now from the so-called Islamic State in all their aspects across the vast region. The integrated approach implies also that the long-standing conflicts should be examined primarily between Arabs and Israel. The absence of settlement of the Palestinian issue over several decades remains, as it is widely recognized, as one of the main factors of instability in the region and helps the extremists to recruit more and more jihadists. The year 2015 is very special for my country in the context of strengthening cooperation in the BRICS format. As you are well aware, Russia assumed the presidency in BRICS from Brazil on April 1st, 2015. The next 7th summit of BRICS will be held on July 8-9 in the Russian city Ufa. We are happy to welcome participation of Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi, in this important event. In fact, today, when we speak about changing global order, one can't but admit that cooperation in BRICS is one of the pillars of Russian-Indian special and privileged strategic partnership. According to Russian foreign policy perceptions, multipolarity, central role of the UN, respect of the international law, avoidance of double standards in addressing the developmental matters and regional conflicts, helps dealing with the new challenges and threats. Commitment to comprehensive strengthening of BRICS outlined in the concept of the foreign policy of the Russian Federation is one of the priorities for our diplomacy. We are currently implementing dozens of initiatives aimed at promoting practical secretarial cooperation. Many of them are considered as at a ministerial level. To be specific, let me brief you about the priorities which Russian presidency in BRICS in 2015-2016 implies. It intends to strengthen positions of BRICS on the international arena, to promote solutions to the most pressing international political issues which represent a priority for BRICS based on consolidated approaches of the 5 member states, to expand external relations of BRICS, to achieve tangible progress in reforming the international monetary and financial system, primarily the IMF, with the support of BRICS, to further develop multilateral financial cooperation within the framework of BRICS, including the full-fledged launching of the new development bank and the contingent reserve arrangement of BRICS countries, to qualitatively identify the new areas of BRICS activities, to promote initiatives aimed at improving the BRICS management and implementing practical measures for gradual institutionalization of the forum. As I've already mentioned, one of the most important areas of interaction within BRICS is comprehensive cooperation and coordination in the United Nations. It will prevent any country from a possibility to impose policies for regime manipulation and push through their unilateral solutions to conflicts by means of sanctions and military force. Various BRICS dialogue mechanisms are aimed at promoting further consolidation and coordination of strategic stability, international and regional security, non-proliferation of the weapons of mass destruction, settlement of regional conflicts, and maintenance of regional stability, consolidation of the BRICS countries against the threats of international terrorism arising from the hotbeds of local wars and the armed conflicts like Syria and Afghanistan shall be of primary importance. Strengthening international information security and combining efforts to fight drug trafficking are no exception. International financial and economic cooperation within BRICS will remain the core of financial stability and economic security in the long-time perspective. Let me stress that the long-term objective of Russian Federation in BRICS and accordingly a cross-cutting task of the presidency is aimed at gradual transformation of BRICS from the dialogue forum into the full-scale mechanism for strategic and day-to-day interaction on key political, economic and social issues. This will require it to keep progressively expanding the areas of cooperation and to create an extensive system of interaction mechanisms, including the BRICS Secretariat. All this is intended to raise BRICS to the level of important element in the global governance system of the 21st century. Jointly with our closest like-minded partners, we will deepen interaction, to raise cooperation in the framework of BRICS to a fundamentally new level. We are committed to giving this cooperation a shape of multilateral strategic partnership on the wide range of global economic and political issues. Thus, we aim at positioning BRICS as a new model of global relations, overcoming single dimension in the pattern of North, South, or East-West schemes. We highly appreciate India's continued support of the Russian initiatives in BRICS. Speaking about comprehensive cooperation between our two countries, it is worth mentioning that the coming BRICS forum in Ufa will be followed by the summit of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, where important political decisions are to be taken on to officially approve India's bid for full-fledged membership. In the context of the changing global order, specifically new scenarios in the West Asia and the Asian Pacific region, it will be a huge step forward in promoting regional partnership. Russia believes that the SCO, with India on board, will become much stronger given its expertise in countering regional challenges and threats, especially emanating from still unstable Afghanistan. The formation of Afghanistan as a strong, sustainable and prosperous state is a priority of both Moscow and New Delhi. It's true that today the world order is dramatically changing. Profound mutations of political and economical landscape, tectonic shifts in the centers of power in the global scale are underway. The results of this process we witness in the Middle East, North Africa, Asian Pacific region, and finally in Europe. It is becoming more and more obvious that in 21st century international relations are moving towards establishment of polycentric system. In other words, deciding the world's fate cannot and must not be the prerogative of either one state, however powerful it can be, or opposing military and political blocs, as it used to be during the Cold War, or a narrow group of the chosen powers staking claims on global diktat. The necessity to create a just, democratic, sustainable and a perfect scenario, a self-regulating structure of international relations becomes more and more obvious. I'm happy to state once again that Russia and India are principal natural stockholders in this endeavor. Intensifying multifaceted cooperation with India has always been and remains a key priority of Russian foreign policy. It is especially topical today when the process of shifting the centers of global economic growth to Asia is taking place. Let's be honest, factors encouraging instability and conflict continue to accumulate in international relations. This is a very difficult stage in the formation of a more just and democratic polycentric system, which is objectively occurring, reflecting the geographical and civilizational diversity of the world today. We keep coming up against the desire of the US and its allies to reserve this trend and to impose their will, approaches and values on other participants of international relations. The stakes are high. Fundamental principles of the UN Charter are systematically violated. Double standards are widely used, and there is interference in the internal affairs of sovereign states in order to reaffirm a unilateral world order. The array of measures is in store for those who object, from unilateral illegitimate sanctions, as it happens with Russia, to direct military intervention. We deem this approach not only unlawful but also short-sighted, ignoring the fact that the fate of the world today cannot be determined by a single state or a narrow group of states. Russia will continue to firmly uphold truth and justice in the international affairs, as well as the right of our compatriots, Russians, anywhere around the globe. No one who is trying to impose sanctions against Russia or to exert any other methods of pressure on my country will ever force us to abandon our positions or principles on key issues. Russia is convinced that negative developments in today's international relations are influenced by the recurrence of one-sided actions, attempts to impose one's values on others to achieve geopolitical advantages, one under the cover of most noble slogans. All this can lead to uncontrolled chaos in some states and regions. The example we can see in Ukraine today, attempts to impose anarchy and in the global affairs. Such alarming developments we have witnessed previously in Yugoslavia, Iraq, Libya, Syria, and a number of other countries. Unfortunately, as I just mentioned, this very tendency is evident today in Russia's close neighborhood in Ukraine. We consider the situation in Ukraine to be a great challenge, not only to Russia as a closest neighbor of this country, but to the present international system as a whole. A deep and pervasive crisis which fraternal Ukrainian nation is going through, especially since the end of 2013, poses serious anxiety in Russia. In our assessment, dramatic events in that country clearly show that in the minds of some politicians, especially in the West, still there prevails the versions of self-determination of other states and consequently disregard of the interest of others, disrespect of history, which is the essence of double standards. We understand that this is the part of the big game of the Western states towards extension of the NATO and expansion of the European Union in order to subdue Russia once and forever, remove her as a strong, independent world power. To reach these aims, they have thrown the Ukrainians into a painful dilemma of choice between the West and the East, thus even more exacerbating its domestic contradictions. Regardless of the Ukrainian realities, massive open support was provided to the political movements that were considered conduits for Western influence. Moreover, it was done in violation of the Ukrainian constitution when power in Kiev was seized through violent street rioting, supported by direct involvement and the connivance of the ministers and other officials from the United States and the European Union. The new Kiev authorities, relying on the indulgence of their Western puppeteers, opted for suppression by force of the part of the Ukrainian people that had rejected the attempts to impose the anti-constitutional way of life and the entire country, and wanted to defend its rights to the native language, culture and history. It is precisely the aggressive assault on these rights that compelled the population of Crimea to take the destiny in their own hands and make a choice in favor of self-determination and return to Russia. This was the absolutely free choice no matter what was invented by those who are responsible in the first place for the internal conflict in Ukraine. The mendacity of the West and those who came into power in Kiev over the acts committed in Maidan and later in Donetsk, Lugansk and Kharkov and other cities of southeast Ukraine is striking. The attempts to distort the truth and to hide the facts behind blanket accusations have been undertaken at all stages of the Ukrainian crisis. Nothing has been done to track down and prosecute those responsible for February 2014 bloody events in Maidan or massive loss of human lives in Odessa, Mariupol and other regions of Ukraine. The scale of appalling humanitarian disaster provoked by the exiled Ukrainian army in the southeastern Ukraine has been deliberately underscored. According to the latest statistics, more than 6,000 people have been killed there since April 2014, when Kiev launched a military operation against independent supporters and who refused to recognize the country's coup-imposed government, held a referendum in May last year and finalized its secession by creating Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics with their own governments. Russia is concerned with the fact that despite the UN Security Council resolution, a thorough and independent investigation of the circumstances of the loss of the Malaysian airline over the territory of Ukraine has been protracted. The culprits of all these crimes must be identified and brought to justice. Otherwise, the national reconciliation in Ukraine can hardly be expected. The way to overcome the crisis has been opened with the achievement of the Minsk ceasefire agreement in the southeastern Ukraine that was reached early this year on the basis of negotiations initiated by Russia, Germany, France and the Organization for Security and Cooperation. Russia continues to actively promote the political settlement. We call for the strict and complete implementation of the Minsk ceasefire agreement. Let me remind that the agreement calls for halting of fighting, withdrawal of heavy weaponry, including artillery, from the line of contact by both sides of the conflict, and initiating peaceful, inclusive political dialogue. It also conditions the reintegration of the two self-proclaimed republics into Ukraine on Kiev overhauling the country's constitution so as to grant them a special status within the nation's borders. Russia is convinced that a constitutional reform with participation of all regions is the most important prerequisite to reach political stability, peace and tranquility in Ukraine. Unfortunately, new round of fighting erupted in East Ukraine in the first week of June. Local independence supporters accused the Kiev authorities of launching an offensive near the Donetsk region. And Kiev forces, on their own part, claimed that the shelling was a response to the militia's advances. Each and every day bring the news about fresh incidents of breaking ceasefire. Ukrainian forces continue daily indiscriminate shelling of Donetsk city and small towns in the territory of Donetsk Republic, leading to dozens of new casualties among civilians. European Foreign Affairs spokesman qualified the renewed hostilities as the biggest ceasefire violation since the Minsk peace deal came into effect. As we see it now, while declaring their full commitment to the Minsk agreements, Kiev authorities actually reject the underlying principle spelled out in the package measures, namely direct dialogue with Lugansk and Donetsk. But for Russia, it's absolutely clear that a direct dialogue is key to resolving temporarily at least the special status issue, to holding municipal elections there and to carrying a constitutional reform which should fully take into account the position of Donetsk and Luhansk as regards to these territories. In the prevailing situation, Moscow stresses the need for Washington to influence Kiev so as to firstly prevent Ukrainian authorities from sliding into the force-based scenarios, and secondly help launch a political process through direct dialogue with Donetsk and Lugansk. Unfortunately, there are certain forces in the ruling Ukrainian regime which claim that the more the military hysteria is wiped up, the easier it will be for the Ukrainian authorities to persuade the West to step up the pressure on Russia. This is the root of the problem, and that is why, while Russia is continuously sending thousands of tons of humanitarian aid to the southeastern regions of Ukraine, Kiev, with the convenience of West, is organizing their military provocations that bring new casualties among civilian population and lead to deepening humanitarian catastrophe in these territories. The West position for us is clear. It was articulated at the recent summit of G7. If the Minsk agreements are implemented, sanctions against Russia may be softened or even lifted. They say so as if Russia, openly described as aggressor, was the only country to sign the Minsk agreement and should therefore be the only one to implement them. But it is not so. When asked how they will react to more and more instances of Kiev failing to honor its commitments, substantiated by evidence, Western leaders prefer to keep silent. In fact, we regard it as a sign of hypocrisy, duplicity of their position. They clearly see that Kiev is trying to avoid implementing the Minsk agreements in its actual letter and spirit. However, there is a growing evidence that the West does not intend to abandon its plan of increasing its military presence near Russian borders. Now the Pentagon is planning to position arms warehouses in NATO's Eastern European member countries for the purpose of rotating training. Possible destination for the deployment of up to 1,200 vehicles, including 250 tanks, Bradley fighting machines, vehicles, and armored howitzers include Bulgaria, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, Romania, Estonia, and possibly Hungary. These prepositioned weapons would be enough to equip a brigade of 3,000 to 5,000 military personnel. These plans are expected to be coordinated in time for approval at the upcoming NATO Defense Ministers meeting in Brussels in late June. The proposal, if approved, would represent the first time since the end of the Cold War that the United States has stationed heavy military equipment in the newer NATO member nations in Eastern Europe that had once been part of the Soviet sphere of influence. The arguments used by Washington to justify these plans are quite predictable. It claims that these measures are necessary to reassure its European allies in the face of the alleged Russian threat. In fact, Washington and its European allies know that the perceived Russian threat is but a myth, which can be used to relieve the United States of responsibility for the anti-constitutional coup in Ukraine and the activities of certain forces in Kiev that refuse to end the threat-sided war in Donbass. The United States is fueling tension and nurturing its European allies' anti-Russian fears, also because it plans to use current tension to expand its military presence and hence strengthen its influence in Europe. However, Russia is still hopeful that reasons will prevail and the situation in Europe will be stopped from sliding into the new military confrontation with destructive consequences. Concluding remarks on these subjects, I would like to state that we highly value India's position on the events in Crimea and Ukraine and the necessity of an inclusive dialogue in that country and peaceful resolution of the conflict. It was specially mentioned and clearly underlined by President Putin, who thanked India for a well-balanced, wise and objective approach to the situation in Ukraine. Let me finally come to the last part of this address. This year is also remarkable for another important date in Russian-Indian relations. In autumn, we will be celebrating 15th anniversary of the historic declaration of strategic partnership. This document was signed in the year 2000 by Vladimir Putin and Atal Bihari Vajpayee. Since then, Russian-Indian relations has continued to steadily strengthen and has evolved into a special and privileged strategic partnership, having no similar example ever traced in the history of world diplomacy. According to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who will be traveling this year to Russia twice, and this is in itself, this fact is rather symbolic. He will visit Russia next month and for the annual bilateral summit in autumn. The ties between our two nations will acquire greater relevance in the coming days. On June 12th, conveying his greetings and good wishes on occasion of the Day of Russia, Mr. Modi said that India and Russia enjoy unique and time-tested relations, characterized by strong goodwill between our people. He added that it was his firm belief that special and privileged strategic partnership between our nations will acquire greater relevance in the days ahead. In fact, this once again proves that ties between Russia and India are immune to any change in domestic political agenda or fluctuations in the international arena. Strengthening this cooperation remains the key priority of foreign policies of both our countries. Today, the uniqueness of our relations persists in the scope and range. We, be it design and manufacture of the best in the world, BrahMos supersonic cruise missiles, or state-of-the-art fifth generation fighter, the lease of Russian nuclear submarine that was christened as Chakra in Indian Navy, handover of strategically important INS Vikramaditya on conclusion of the world's second, or construction of the world's safest nuclear power units of Kudankulam. Like no other state in the world, we really share cutting-edge technologies in more sensitive spheres with our friend India. Actually, like no other state, we are engaged in implementing Make in India program since late 1950s. Let me remind that my country was helping India to reach the capacity to produce locally most essential products, with construction of the first giant steel mills in Bhilai and Bokaro, pharmaceutical factory in Rishikesh, assembly lines of MiG fighters, and many other projects. Today we march ahead with confidence, expanding the scope of our joint endeavors. At the same time, we frankly discuss weak points and shortcomings which hamper the process the progress of our relations. Potential of Russian-Indian trade, investment, technological and cultural interaction is far from having been exhausted. One of the major areas of concern is our trade and economic cooperation. Through ties, though this sphere has been developing quite dynamically, recently we almost got stuck with the figure of bilateral trade turnover of about US $10 billion, which is not acceptable at all, and if compared to Russia's and India's trade with their main counterparts like China or European Union is rather insignificant. Our countries have necessary resources to ensure real growth and improve the quality parameters of economic cooperation. We are equally interested in working out new models of interactions based on diversification of export and further increase of high-tech innovative products share in our trade. Boosting Russian-Indian trade cooperation was high on the summit agenda last December. Immediate measures are needed to diversify bilateral trade, promote investments, and encourage private and state-run companies to close cooperation. What is more, they set a task to increase the bilateral trade volume up to $30 billion by the year 2025. There exists a strong commitment of Moscow and Delhi to eliminate major impediments in this sphere. We have agreed to work out a mechanism that would allow us to use national currencies in mutual payments. We carry on our efforts to build a reliable and effective transport infrastructure between Russia and India, the North-South multimodal transport corridor. Once implemented, it will considerably reduce the time of delivery of goods and shipment charges. Ultimately, we are moving towards creating a free trade zone between India and member states of Euro-Asian Economic Union. A joint bilateral working group of the India Eurasian Economic Union Agreement on Comprehensive Economic Cooperation has been set up and will start, is supposed to deliver the results of their joint work very soon. Updating the Russian-Indian agreements on mutual protection and encouragement of investments will also give a positive signal to our business communities. Let me just conclude by reminding that the annual Russian-Indian summit last December was considered to be very productive. More than 50 agreements in the number of fields of bilateral cooperation were signed, which will definitely give a strong impetus to our cooperation in future. Well, not to take much of your time, I've already used it. Let me conclude by saying that Russia understands and supports the policy of import substitution in the sphere of military production declared by the Prime Minister Narendra Modi. We believe that only a state which is self-sufficient in this sphere can claim the status of a world power. At the same time, we are convinced that the current situation, when Russia has a similar strategic goal, creates favorable conditions to join our efforts in such an important segment of bilateral relations as military and technical cooperation. The analysis of Russian-Indian ties indicates that our cooperation in this field has significant potential for further development. It includes joint development of production and production of armaments and military equipment with participation of public and private companies, as well as establishment of joint ventures for service centers capable of performing routine maintenance and repairs of military equipment for all types of Indian armed forces. I'll conclude with one more consideration. New Delhi perfectly understands that in terms of geopolitics, Russia is a kind of a bridge between Europe and Asia. It is quite natural that my country maintains close partnership relations with Beijing. We have a dialogue with Islamabad as well. These relations are of separate value and meaning for Russia. We are interested in strengthening contacts with all the Asia-Pacific countries. In our turn, we are not jealous of India's contacts with the United States and other countries as well. However, I want to assure you, this doesn't jeopardize in any way our historical and time-tested friendship or cast a shadow on the character of Russian-Indian Special Privileged Strategic Partnership.